Have you ever thought that dreams are not just nocturnal illusions, but real portals to other dimensions? What if they could show us past, present, or even future events? What if we could access information beyond our physical senses simply by closing our eyes? This hypothesis, as incredible as it may seem, has been taken very seriously by researchers, neuroscientists, psychologists, and even government agencies. According to numerous studies, there is a phenomenon known as dream ESP, extrasensory perception in dreams, capable of providing accurate data on events or elements that the dreamer could not know by conventional means. And these are not only experiences reported by mystics or visionaries, but also by ordinary people without particular spiritual inclinations. Over the past few decades, hundreds of studies have been conducted to explore the nature of prophetic dreams and lucid dreams. In the latter, the dreamer becomes aware of the fact that he is dreaming and is able to modify events, explore environments, even communicate with other people in dreams. This state of awareness seems to open a window on a different reality, where the laws of time and space bend to a more subtle logic. An analysis conducted over 50 years of research, from 1966 to 2016, revealed that dream content can be used to identify target materials with statistically significant accuracy, well above chance. These conclusions emerged from comparative studies carried out by universities in Australia, the United Kingdom, and Italy. But how does this process really work? What is the mechanism that connects the dream to reality? To answer these questions, in the 1960s, one of the first official dream research laboratories was born in Brooklyn, New York, at Maimonides Medical Center. It was founded by Montague Ullman and directed by psychologist Stanley Krippner. The two scholars were fascinated by the first results obtained at the University of Chicago on REM sleep states, the phase in which dream activity is most intense, and decided to design an innovative experiment. The procedure was simple but ingenious. A subject was left to sleep, connected to sensors to detect the REM phase. In another room, an image was sealed in an envelope, out of sight of anyone. When he woke up, the subject had to tell what he had dreamed. The first test was conducted with the famous medium Eileen Garrett. During the night, Eileen dreamed of a chariot race pulled by black and white horses, a scene that reminded her of the novel Ben-Hur she had read years earlier. In the morning, the envelope was opened. Inside, there was a frame taken from the film adaptation of the film Ben-Hur. The correspondence was amazing. Although that first experiment could be considered an isolated case, it aroused great interest and prompted the team to continue. Over 200 experiments were conducted, all published in academic articles and books, in a transparent way and accessible to anyone who wanted to verify or replicate them. Each study added a piece to the mystery of dreams and their link with reality. But the question went far beyond simple scientific curiosity. The content of dreams not only seemed to reflect elements of the real world, but in some cases anticipated them. What if it was really possible to access future information while sleeping? The implications are enormous, both philosophically and technologically. Not surprisingly, even the CIA during the Cold War showed interest in these phenomena. Secret remote viewing projects and precognitive dreams were funded and analyzed as potential information-gathering tools. In a world where information is power, the idea of predicting the future becomes a strategic resource. Even historical figures such as Abraham Lincoln reported premonitory dreams. A few days before his assassination, he dreamed of his own funeral at the White House. Similarly, some members of the band Lynyrd Skynyrd reported disturbing dreams shortly before the plane crash that would seal their fate. Coincidences? Or evidence that dreams can transcend time boundaries? Many scholars today believe that the universe itself is holographic in nature, a field of information in which each part contains the whole. Dreams, then, would be like open windows onto this unified field. When we enter altered states of consciousness, we may connect with fragments of the past, present, or future, receiving insights that are far beyond normal rational abilities. Have you ever thought that your dreams could contain messages from the future? Not simple reflections of the mind, but authentic signals, anticipations of real events, transmitted through a mechanism that science still struggles to understand. For decades, frontier researchers have been trying to answer this question, and what they discovered is nothing short of surprising. Some dreams, called dream ESPs, seem to offer access to information that should not be knowable. And these are not simple subjective impressions. In hundreds of documented cases, the images seen in dreams have anticipated concrete and verifiable events with a precision that is difficult to ignore. The Dream Research Laboratory at Maimonides Medical Center was among the first to take this hypothesis seriously. They published their findings openly in over 100 articles that appeared in journals of psychiatry, psychology, and medicine. The goal was clear: to allow other researchers to replicate the experiments, to verify the anomalies, and to finally understand if something deeper was hidden behind the dream. The scope of the discoveries attracted the attention of far more powerful subjects. In 1973, the National Institute of Mental Health, better known as NIMH, granted the center federal funding of more than $500,000. It was the first time that the U.S. government had officially subsidized parapsychological research on such a large scale. But why all this interest? One of the most convincing answers came from a simple fact. About 65% of spontaneous ESP experiences, i.e. those not induced in the laboratory, occurred during dreams. Not during waking, not in a meditative state, but just at the moment when consciousness relaxes and opens up to subtle dimensions. In some cases, what the subjects dreamed of turned out to be incredibly precise and disturbing. As in the case of Valicia Paris, a hematology researcher involved in one of the center's experiments. On the night of July 20th, he dreamed of seeing a colleague intent on reading a newspaper. On the title page, however, there was an image that troubled her: the collapse of a building. Convinced that it was not just any dream, she asked that it be carefully noted. 2 weeks. Later, on August 3rd, the Broadway Central Hotel collapsed in Manhattan. The Daily News newspaper published on its front page a photo of the tragedy that exactly corresponded to Valicia's dream vision. Coincidence? Premonition? Or concrete proof that the dream state puts us in touch with a deeper layer of reality? That's not all. At that time, NIMH was also associated with strange animal Experiments. A book published in 1971 and then adapted into the famous animated film The Secret of NIMH told of mice subjected to scientific tests capable of increasing their intelligence. These animals not only developed superior cognitive abilities, but were able to read, write, and even predict future events. Was it just fantasy? Or was it a disguised metaphor for what was really being tested in federal laboratories? Another surprising discovery of the Maimonides Center concerned the environment. The researchers noticed that ESP dreams manifested more easily under specific conditions. They had always been careful to create a calm and respectful atmosphere for the subjects, but the real breakthrough came thanks to the studies of Michael Persinger, professor of psychology. Persinger had observed a link between geomagnetic activity and psychic phenomena. During periods of solar calm with few electromagnetic storms, there was an increase in reports of extrasensory events. When the Maimonides team sent them their data, the analysis confirmed the correlation. The nights with little electromagnetic interference were also those with the most accurate ESP dreams. This raises a fascinating question. Do we really live in an electrical universe where invisible energies condition our minds? If Earth's geomagnetic field can interfere with dreams, what could constant exposure to artificial waves, smartphones, and wireless networks do? Perhaps these interferences not only disturb sleep, but also block our natural ability to perceive beyond the boundaries of ordinary reality. The idea that the universe is a vibrant unit of energy and information is as old as man. Every element, every living being, could be part of a subtle web in which information flows continuously. Dreams, then, become the threshold through which we can access this field. No longer simple nocturnal illusions, but tools of knowledge, windows on the invisible. Have you ever had the feeling that you knew something before it happened, as if a part of you had already experienced that moment? What if this perception was not just a coincidence, but proof that the mind can travel beyond time, accessing information stored in a dimension that we do not yet understand? Many have wondered if the research on dreams and extrasensory perception was really authentic, or if it is just suggestions. Some even speculated that the results from the Maimonides Medical Center lab were too good to be true. But the reality is that, over time, other independent laboratories tried to replicate those experiments. And the surprising thing is that they succeeded. Global analyses showed that the results were repeated more often than just chance.
But the next step was even more ambitious. Instead of comparing dreams to images sealed in envelopes, psychologist Stanley Krippner devised a new experiment. He asked whether it was possible for a subject to dream of an experience that he would have the following day, without either himself or the researchers knowing in advance what it was. No static images, no prepackaged visual references, just pure experience, yet to be determined. The method was simple but ingenious. In the morning, an assistant would roll dice, select a numbered box from a storage room, and open it. Inside was the participant's assigned experience for the day. In one such case, the man would be treated to a boring presentation about birds, a simple educational slideshow. But the night before, in the subject's dream, every single scene was populated by birds. Not one, not two, but dreams entirely devoted to birds. Yet, no one, not even the experimenters, knew what would happen to them. There was no possibility of suggestion. Yet, the mind had seen ahead. It had anticipated the future. How did he do it? Had he tapped into a dimension where linear time does not exist, where the future is already written in a form accessible to those who know where to look? This kind of research opened the door to much broader questions. And this is where an unexpected player enters the scene, the CIA. In the 1980s, government interest in human consciousness and its hidden potential reached a new peak. In secret, programs were developed that aimed to go far beyond the prophetic dream. In 1983, a U.S. Army officer, Lieutenant Commander Wayne M. McDonnell, published an extraordinary document, a comprehensive analysis of the so-called Gateway Process. The Gateway Process was developed with the support of the Monroe Institute, a leading center for the study of altered states of consciousness, remote viewing, and parapsychology. The goal? To expand human consciousness to transcend the limitations of time and space. It was not a spiritual theory, but a scientific system based on three pillars: biomedical engineering, transcendental meditation, and experimental data. The heart of the technique was the synchronization of the cerebral hemispheres, called hemisync. Through the use of specific audio frequencies, they tried to unify the activity of the right and left hemispheres, creating a deep, stable, and receptive mental state. In that state, according to scientists, the human mind could abandon the limits of matter and access higher planes of intuition, where the entire universe revealed itself as a living field of knowledge. The paper described the process with startling clarity. The gateway was, in essence, a training system to increase the strength, coherence, and frequency of brain waves to the point of generating a stable altered state of consciousness. Once this state was achieved, the participant not only surpassed normal sensory perception, but could theoretically exit the physical dimension itself, accessing what was described as the various levels of intuitive knowledge that the universe offers. This concept, which once would have been relegated to science fiction or esoteric mysticism, became a subject of study for the most powerful military departments in the world. The reason? Rival countries like the Soviet Union had begun similar initiatives. Research, and no one wanted to be left behind in the race to understand, and potentially control, human consciousness. All of which leads us to a broader reflection. What if reality were not something fixed, but a changing and interactive field, in which the mind can move, see, predict? What if dreams, visions, intuitions were not illusions, but real fragments of a universe much larger than we dare imagine? Have you ever imagined that your brain could function like an antenna, tuning into frequencies that go beyond the physical limits of the human body? What if your thoughts, dreams, and intuitions weren't confined to your mind, but traveled like waves through space, resonating with the entire planet? In the 1980s, a document commissioned by the US military, known as Gateway. The trial report explored just that possibility. At the heart of it all was a technique called binaural beats, two slightly different frequencies played simultaneously in each ear. The brain, sensing the difference between the two, created a third internal frequency, inducing a state of deep relaxation. But the goal was more than just calm, it was about harmonizing the two hemispheres of the brain, getting them to vibrate in unison. According to the report, once the brain reached a state of coherence in its waves, it was possible to progressively accelerate those frequencies, tuning into increasingly higher and more sophisticated energy levels present in the universe. It was as if the mind, in a refined state of vibration, could access higher levels of information, invisible to ordinary consciousness. The comparison was clear. The human body became a kind of living tuning fork, which tuned itself first to the frequencies of the Earth and then to those of the cosmos. The scientific basis for this concept was developed by the pioneer Itzhak Bentov, who demonstrated that resonance was a fundamental biological component. Vibrations were generated in the brain, in the fluid surrounding it, and in the ventricular cavities above the brainstem. When the heart, in a state of deep relaxation, produced a coherent rhythmic beat, this pattern was transmitted to the cerebrospinal fluid, inducing subtle but measurable movements in the brain. These micro-movements, according to Bentov, represented a finely tuned vibratory system that transferred energy into the Earth's ionospheric cavity. In other words, the human body, under certain conditions, became an integral part of the Earth's electromagnetic system, vibrating at its own frequency. The most fascinating fact was that these waves had a wavelength of about 40,000 kilometers, equal to the Earth's circumference. This was a signal capable of passing through metal, concrete, water, and even biological tissue. It did not vanish in time or space. It was the perfect natural medium for the transmission of telepathic thought. This meant that a person, once synchronized with the Earth's electromagnetic field, could project their consciousness into the surrounding space. Thought, awareness itself, was transferred into energy continuum with which it now shared the same vibration. Imagine your mind moving instantly to any point on Earth, because it vibrates in tune with it. Reaching even higher frequencies, according to studies, has opened access to higher states of being, facilitating out-of-body experiences, visions, and telepathic communications between individuals tuned to the same frequency. Frequency. It was a truly global mental network, supported by the energetic structure of the Earth itself. And what does all this have to do with dreams? Everything. The deep relaxation required to resonate with these states is not unlike what we experience during REM sleep, which is the most intense and dreamlike phase of rest. Gateway process researchers found that such states could be induced voluntarily. And once achieved, people have reported extraordinary experiences, out-of-body, astral travel, encounters with non-human forms of consciousness, visions of worlds that went far beyond everyday reality. This is exactly what many dreamers have always described. A state in which the mind moves freely, explores non-physical landscapes, anticipates events, and sometimes it communicates with entities or other human beings. These experiences, often ignored or classified as fantastic, could instead be the result of a real alignment with higher energetic levels. The dream, therefore, could be our natural door to infinity. Not a simple product of the mind, but an interface with universal consciousness. And if we learn to control it, to pilot it, like Lucid dreams or deep meditation techniques show that we could perhaps rewrite the rules of perception, time, and space. All this changes the way we see ourselves, the mind, and the cosmos. We are not simple observers, but active participants in a vibratory network in which every thought, every impulse, can influence and connect with the entire universe. Have you ever thought that a dream could hold the key to understanding the future? That while we sleep, our consciousness breaks free from the confines of time and space, crossing dimensions that science still struggles to explain? Some historical events, recent studies, and government documents seem to suggest that this hypothesis is not far-fetched at all. Let's take, for example, one of the most mysterious episodes related to the figure of Abraham Lincoln. A few days before his assassination, on April 14, 1865, Lincoln told his wife Mary and some friends that he had had a particularly disturbing dream. In that nocturnal vision, he wandered through the corridors of the White House until he entered the East Room, where there was a covered room. Corpse, watched over by soldiers and surrounded by a crowd of mourners. He asked who had died. The answer was clear and shocking: the president, killed by an assassin. What is striking is not only the dramatic similarity with his real end, but the fact that Lincoln, although he reported the dream, did not interpret it as a premonition of his own death. He thought he was referring to someone else. However, his beliefs about dreams were strong. In an 1863 letter to his wife, Lincoln advised her to put away her son's gun, after having had a particularly bad dream about him. It was as if he had sensed a potential danger and wanted to prevent it. But there was more. Lincoln often spoke of a recurring dream. He saw himself aboard a ship, racing through unknown waters. A dizzying speed. This dream, according to his stories, occurred punctually on the eve of crucial historical events of the American Civil War. The last time he did so was the night before his death. What really happens in the moments preceding events full of collective consequences? It is possible that important events such as wars or presidential assassinations generate a sort of information wave, an energetic emanation that passes through the environment, intercepted by particularly sensitive minds. Modern research suggests that it is not only possible, but perhaps occurs regularly. The famous Gateway process, developed by the CIA in collaboration with the Monroe Institute, was based on decades of studies on altered states of consciousness. The goal was to allow the human being to expand his perception beyond the limits imposed by the physical body. According to the official document written by Commander Wayne M. McDonnell, one of the former trainers of the Monroe Institute, he had found a way to induce out-of-body experiences reliably, using the technique of binaural beats to synchronize the brain hemispheres during the REM phase of sleep. It was possible to lead the subject into a state in which consciousness detached from the body. The discovery was surprising. According to the report, almost all people, during REM sleep, naturally experience a detachment from their physical form, traveling to other states of existence without realizing it. What for millennia had been
described by spiritual and religious traditions, from shamanic rituals to yogic practices, was now recognized in scientific terms. The report went even further, stating that the universe, as some theoretical physicists understand it today, surprisingly coincided with the ancient cosmologies of advanced civilizations. In essence, the cultures of the past, often labeled as mystical or primitive, had already intuited the true nature of reality through inner practices that allowed them to see beyond the veil of the material world. However, part of the document also issued a warning. Anyone who underwent this type of protocol had to be mentally prepared for unexpected encounters. When you cross the boundaries of time and space, you can run into intelligent, non-corporeal entities. Not simple dreams, therefore, but authentic experiences in parallel worlds, in contact with forms of consciousness independent of matter. These experiences come very close to what we call lucid dreaming, a state in which you realize that you are dreaming and become an active participant in the dream world. The difference is that, in lucid dreaming, you have the opportunity to explore these dimensions consciously. And the stories of those who have reached this state often speak of extraordinary visions, profound encounters, and sensations that transcend all logic. Lincoln may have been one of these unwitting travelers. Perhaps his dreams were not just reflections of anxieties or hopes, but authentic messages from a more subtle dimension in which future events are already visible, if you know where to look. Perhaps the boundary between waking and dreaming, between reality and perception, is much more blurred than we think. Have you ever thought that the human mind, if properly trained, can overcome the limits of the body, cross the barriers of time and space, and operate in dimensions that are normally closed to us? That there is an altered state of consciousness, similar to dreams, in which all this becomes not only possible, but even measurable? It is precisely on this hypothesis that the research of some of the most powerful agencies in the world, including the CIA, has focused. For them, the dream was not only a psychological phenomenon, but a potential weapon, a portal to an invisible but very powerful field of action. If a human being can travel with the mind, send or receive information without the use of the senses, then he can also be trained to spy, influence, or even sabotage simply by thought. A declassified document from 1961, which can be found today on the official CIA website, reports a translation of a symposium held in Moscow in 1960. The event was so significant that American analysts kept the records. The theme? The transmission of thought. But there was a curious paradox. While the Soviets were trying to understand what the Americans were doing, the Americans in turn were trying to grasp Russian progress, a cold war in the mind as well as in the skies. One of the most interesting episodes of that period concerns the alleged American experimentation on the transmission of thought on board the submarine Nautilus. The Soviets learned that the United States was conducting experiments on telepathy in completely isolated environments, underwater. For them, if it were true, it would have represented a revolutionary step, capable of changing the rules of military communication. But America's fascination with telepathy was not limited to government structures. Intellectuals and writers such as Upton Sinclair were also interested in the phenomenon. His wife Mary, in a state of dream or deep relaxation, seemed to receive thoughts as if she were traveling on invisible radio waves. In one famous case, Mary, while absent-mindedly scribbling, drew flowers without knowing why. When she asked Upton what he was reading, he replied, "Flowers." The two began to experiment, obtaining surprising results. And they were not the only ones. As early as 1932, cases of remote hypnosis were documented, in which a woman was induced into a state of trance without the hypnotist being in the same room. The Soviets called this type of mental transmission mind radio, just like Sinclair. It was what both superpowers dreamed of building, a system of mental communication, reliable and secret. Imagine an army capable of communicating with a submersible in deep dive or influencing the behavior of an enemy individual without any physical contact. Imagine a team that manages to send mental messages to an astronaut in space. It's not science fiction, it's what they were working on. Another extraordinary document drawn up by the CIA bore the title China's Psychic Children and reported events that occurred in the late 1970s. Throughout China, there were stories of the existence of children with incredible abilities, reading messages written on paper without using their eyes, predicting future events, seeing through solid objects and even moving objects with the power of their minds alone. In 1981, a group of American scholars interested in parapsychology went to China to investigate these reports. Among them was Stanley Krippner, a pioneer of dream research in the 60s. The group met with scientists from Beijing Medical College, Peking University, and the Chinese Academy of Sciences. A recurring theme in those dialogues was the energy called Qi or QI, which has always been central to Eastern traditions. The Chinese guests spoke of Qigong masters, capable of achieving incredible feats, resisting the impact of a stone slab or the blade of a sword, hit directly on the bare chest without being damaged. The Western mind remained skeptical, but the events documented and observed in person forced us to reconsider everything. Out of 3,100 chronic patients who underwent treatments with energy techniques and guided meditation, there were unexplained improvements. Although the existence of Qi could not be demonstrated in the laboratory, its effects were visible. And this energy seemed to have a direct connection to the kind of state of mind that is achieved in deep dreams, in meditation, and perhaps even in those mysterious experiments secretly conducted by government agencies. All of this suggests that dreams, telepathy, out-of-body experiences, and the manipulation of subtle energy are all manifestations of the same mechanism, a mental and physical process that connects us to something bigger, to an invisible web that embraces the planet, perhaps even the universe. Have you ever thought that the human mind, if properly trained, can overcome the limits of the body, cross the barriers of time and space, and operate in dimensions that are normally closed to us? That there is an altered state of consciousness, similar to dreams, in which all this becomes not only possible, but even measurable? It is precisely on this hypothesis that the research of some of the most powerful agencies in the world, including the CIA, has focused. For them, the dream was not only a psychological phenomenon, but a potential weapon, a portal to an invisible but very powerful field of action. If a human being can travel with the mind, send or receive information without the use of the senses, then he can also be trained to spy, influence, or even sabotage simply by thought. A declassified document from 1961, which can be found today on the official CIA website, reports a translation of a symposium held in Moscow in 1960. The event was so significant that American analysts kept the records. The theme? The transmission of thought. But there was a curious paradox. While the Soviets were trying to understand what the Americans were doing, Americans in turn were trying to grasp Russian progress. A Cold War in the mind, as well as in the skies. One of the most interesting episodes of that period concerns the alleged American experimentation on the transmission of thought on board the submarine Nautilus. The Soviets learned that the United States was conducting experiments on telepathy in completely isolated environments underwater. For them, if it were true, it would have represented a revolutionary step, capable of changing the rules of military communication. But America's fascination with telepathy was not limited to government structures. Intellectuals and writers such as Upton Sinclair were also interested in the phenomenon. His wife Mary, in a state of dream or deep relaxation, seemed to receive thoughts as if she were traveling on invisible radio waves. In one famous case, Mary, while absent-mindedly scribbling, drew flowers without knowing why. When she asked Upton what he was reading, he replied, "Flowers." The two began to experiment, obtaining surprising results, and they were not the only ones. As early as 1932, cases of remote hypnosis were documented, in which a woman was induced into a state of trance without the hypnotist being in the same room. The Soviets called this type of mental transmission mind radio, just like Sinclair. It was what both superpowers dreamed of building, a system of mental communication, reliable and secret. Imagine an army capable of communicating with a submersible in deep dive or influencing the behavior of an enemy individual without any physical contact. Imagine a team that manages to send mental messages to an astronaut in space. It's not science fiction, it's what they were working on. Another extraordinary document, drawn up by the CIA, bore the title China's Psychic Children and reported events that occurred in the late 1970s. Throughout China, there were stories of the existence of children with incredible abilities, reading messages written on paper without using their eyes, predicting future events, seeing through solid objects and even moving objects with the power of their minds alone. In 1981, a group of American scholars interested in parapsychology went to China to investigate these reports. Among them was Stanley Krippner, a pioneer of dream research in the 60s. The group met with scientists from Beijing Medical College, Peking University, and the Chinese Academy of Sciences. A recurring theme in those dialogues was the energy called qi, or qi, which has always been central to Eastern traditions. The Chinese guests spoke of qigong masters capable of achieving incredible feats, resisting the impact of a stone slab or the blade of a sword hit directly on the bare chest without being damaged. The Western mind remained skeptical, but the events documented and observed in person forced us to reconsider everything. Out of 100 chronic patients who underwent treatments with energy techniques and guided meditation, there were unexplained improvements. Although the existence of qi could not be demonstrated in the laboratory, its effects were visible, and this energy seemed to have a direct connection to the kind of state of mind that is achieved in deep dreams, in meditation, and perhaps even in those mysterious experiments secretly conducted by government agencies. All of this suggests that dreams, telepathy, out-of-body experiences, and the manipulation of subtle energy are all manifestations of the same mechanism, a mental and physical process that connects us to something bigger, to an invisible web that embraces the planet, perhaps even the universe. Have you ever thought that what happens in dreams is not at all separate from reality? Human functions, skills such as reading through solid objects, predicting future events, or recognizing hidden symbols, without any conventional sensory perception. The American researchers, intrigued by these stories, decided to leave for China and verify everything with their own eyes. They began by observing the results obtained by patients who practiced energy. Techniques such as qigong. After a period of practice of between 3 and 5 years, about 25% of the subjects were completely cured of chronic diseases, 44% showed significant improvements, and 22% reported moderate progress. These data seem to confirm that these were not simply ritual movements, but a real influence on the body and mind. The American delegation was then accompanied to attend demonstrations led by child prodigies. Some were able to identify objects inside sealed containers or read messages written on crumpled sheets without opening them. Not all attempts were perfect, but several of them were so precise that they left those present incredulous. Enthusiastic, the Americans organized a series of official meetings with university professors, editors of the Nature Journal, and members of the Association for Science and Technology. These were experienced, rational scientists who just wanted to understand what was really going on in the field of so-called exceptional human functions, or EHF. But just when the collaborations were about to intensify, something unexpected happened. Suddenly, the meetings were canceled. The reason? An official statement by Yu Guangyun, vice president of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, appeared in the People's Daily newspaper. The senior official had harshly attacked parapsychology, calling it superstition, and denounced the EHF as pseudoscience. His targets were precisely the same figures with whom the Americans had established contacts: editors, teachers, researchers. The pressure became unbearable. Many Chinese scientists, frightened by possible repercussions, discreetly withdrew. They remembered too well the years of the Cultural Revolution, when even an interest in unapproved disciplines could lead to academic exclusion, or worse. However, not all of them disappeared. Some, moved by sincere curiosity, continued to visit the Americans in the hotel, taking risks to keep the dialogue alive. The American researchers, for their part, focused on a practical goal: to replicate the phenomena. They believed it was possible that certain skills existed, but they wanted to verify them with scientific rigor. Until the results could be systematically reproduced, the statements could not be given full validity. Yet something was changing. Shortly after the official criticism, two high-ranking figures, respectively deputy directors of the Institute of Aerospace Medical Engineering and the Space Life Sciences Commission, attended a conference in Cambridge. There, they revealed that China was already integrating EHF techniques into astronaut training. Qigong, according to them, could enhance psychophysical abilities in extreme conditions, and parapsychological research showed results with more than 80% accuracy, a percentage that surpassed any observation made by Westerners. The international scientific community was beginning to realize that dreams, telepathy, and ESP phenomena were not just exotic curiosities. They were radically changing the understanding of consciousness, the human body, and its connection to the universe. The boundaries between science and spirituality became increasingly blurred. In a declassified CIA document, there was talk of an amazing technology developed in the 80s. Masks equipped with light sensors capable of penetrating the dream and allowing the dreamer to respond consciously. By moving the eyes in predetermined patterns, the person in a dream state could communicate with the outside world. It was concrete proof that one could be conscious within the dream and interact with reality outside of it. This paved the way for a fascinating idea. What if, decades ago, it had been discovered that dreams could be a means of communication between mind and universe? What if there was already a technology capable of exploiting these states to expand human capabilities, but it remained confined to secret research? The value of all this goes beyond science. It makes it legitimate to talk about experiences that for too long have been labeled as strange, imaginary, or irrational. Restoring dignity to what happens in dreams, to sudden intuitions, to subtle perceptions, means opening new paths to freedom of thought, perception, and expression. Have you ever had a dream so vivid, so intense that it left you with the unsettling feeling that it was trying to tell you something? Oh, dream that seemed too real to be just imagination, too precise to be just chance? What if that dream, in reality, had been a message, a warning, a window on what was yet to happen? Throughout history, people have had dreams that have turned out to be incredibly prophetic. Sometimes these dreams anticipate personal events. Other times they involve collective tragedies. Although many dismiss them as coincidences or products of an agitated mind, there are examples so precise that they call into question everything we think we know about time, consciousness, and reality. The phenomenon is so widespread that it is considered part of the so-called common dream. These are dreams that anyone could have without needing to believe in the paranormal. Dreams that, although extraordinary, emerge from the collective unconscious that we all share. But when these dreams begin to accurately describe future events, something changes. Randomness begins to lose strength as an explanation, and the hypothesis that there is something more to it makes its way. One of the most impressive examples comes directly from the world of music. Singer JoJo Billingsley, backing vocalist of the group Lynyrd Skynyrd, recounted in an interview a dream that changed her life forever. 2 nights before the band's plane crashed, JoJo had a vivid, heartbreaking dream. He saw the accident clearly, the scene of the disaster, every detail carved into his mind as if it were real. The day after the dream, JoJo woke up in tears, shaken deeply. He tried to contact the band members to warn them not to take that flight. He knew it wasn't just a nocturnal fantasy. He had perceived that that dream had a real meaning, a tangible weight. Later, he learned that the band members had discussed whether to continue flying that plane. It was an internal vote. They decided that this trip would be their last, and it really was. Jojo didn't take that flight. She was the only one to save herself. She said she woke up screaming, crying. Her mother tried to calm her down, suggesting that it was just a bad dream, but she knew. He felt that what he had seen was too real to ignore. And so we wonder, if it is possible to perceive future events through dreams, even in sporadic cases, what does dreaming really mean? If mental energy can cross walls, metal, distances, and even time, what kind of potential are we still ignoring? Research on ESP, extrasensory perception, is not just theory. From the declassification of CIA documents to university studies conducted around the world, an increasingly solid reality emerges. Under particular conditions, the mind is capable of gathering information beyond the limits of time and space, and dreams, in all this, represent an extraordinary portal. There have been experiments in which subjects were able to send signals from the dream dimension to the real world, using eye movement to communicate that they were conscious during the dream. Technologies such as light sensor masks were developed to penetrate dreams and receive answers from sleeping subjects. This showed that one could dream clearly, remain aware, and interact with the external environment. But then, where do the limits of the mind stop? If it is possible to consciously enter a dream, if one can receive information from unknown sources or from future events, what does this mean for our understanding of consciousness? Perhaps dreams are what remains visible of a much larger mechanism. Perhaps they are our direct connection to a level of reality that is still misunderstood. What if these skills were not reserved for a few exceptional individuals? What if, as many researchers suggest, we were all able to access these dimensions as long as we knew how? Meditation, deep breathing, hypnosis, or simply mindful attention to one's dreams could be tools that can open the door to these experiences. In the modern world, where everything must be verifiable, repeatable, and measurable, it is easy to feel embarrassed to tell a premonitory dream or an out-of-the-ordinary experience. But every time we talk about this, every time we share what we have experienced, we contribute to changing the culture. We free up space for what cannot yet be explained. And this freedom to speak is the first step towards a new understanding. If you too have had a dream that turned out to be real, if you have experienced an inexplicable intuition or an experience that has left you speechless, know that you are not alone. Dreams unite us, speak to us, and sometimes save us. I invite you to subscribe to the Shadows and Secrets channel, leave a like if you found this content interesting, and take a look at the other videos that explore the mysteries of the mind, reality, and invisible dimensions. There is still a lot to discover. That said, thank you and see you next time.